Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for attending this virtual meeting of the Hampshire Police and Crime Panel. This meeting is being webcast on YouTube and hosted on Hampshire County Council's own website. All decisions at today's meeting will be reached through a vote. I will call for the vote at the appropriate time under each item, with the vote and its outcome will be read audibly. I'll begin by reading the names of members on the committee today so they can confirm their attendance for the public record. Members, please can you unmute and confirm your attendance when your name is called so we can ensure you can be heard. Thank you. I'll start with myself. I'm Councillor Jan Warwick from Hampshire County Council. Councillor Diane Andrews from New Forest District Council.
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning. Councillor Narinda Baines from Havant Borough Council.
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning. Councillor John Beavis from Gosport Borough Council.
Yeah, good morning, Chair.
Good morning, John. Councillor Simon Bound from Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council.
Morning, Chair.
Good morning. Councillor Trevor Cartwright from Fareham Borough Council.
Good morning, Jan.
Good morning. Councillor Lisa Griffiths representing Winchester City Council.
All right, good morning, Chair.
Good morning. Councillor Lee Hunt from Portsmouth City Council. Lee, I know you're there. Do you want to respond, please, just to confirm? Moving on then, Councillor Philip Lashbrook from Tess Valley Borough Council.
Good morning, Chair. Present. Thank you.
Good morning, Philip. Councillor David McKinney from East Hampshire District Council. Councillor Ken Mushtamp from Rushmore Borough Council.
Good morning. Same
Morning,
one.
Ken.
I'm here.
Councillor Dave Shields from Southampton City Council.
Present, Chair. Good morning.
Morning, Dave. Councillor Tony Jones, who is one of our local authority co-opted members.
Good morning, Chair.
Morning, Tony. Councillor Brian Lamming, who's also a local authority co-opted member.
Good morning, Jan.
Morning, Brian. And Councillor Lynn Stagg, who's also a co-opted local authority member.
Good morning, Chair.
Morning, Lynn. And then we have our two independent members, Mr. Michael Coombs.
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning. And finally, Mr. Bob Perkins.
Hi, everyone.
Morning, Bob. Excellent. Now I have some, under item 1, I have some apologies for absence. We have apologies from Councillor Tonya Craig from Eastleigh Borough Council and Councillor James Radley from Hart District Council. In addition, you'll probably notice a change of chair. The chairman, Councillor Dave Stewart, has made me aware he will be joining this meeting a little bit later on this morning at around 11 o'clock. So in his absence, I will be acting as chairman for this meeting. Item 2 then is declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations to make at this point? Okay, I'll take that as none. Item 3 is the minutes of our previous meeting, which is on pages 3 to 12 of your agenda packs. Are the meetings of this meeting held on the 29th of January 2021 agreed? If you could please unmute and just give me a sort of general agreed.
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 Thank you. Are there any issues at all to be raised?
Chairman, apologies for the interruption. I'm aware that there was an error under item 294, which is in page 5 of the members' packs today. The first paragraph should read £15 per annum, not £15 per month.
Excellent.
Thank you.
That's kind of quite relevant, I would say. Thank you, Caroline. So item 4 then is deputations, and we have had no notification of either public questions or deputation requests received at today's meeting. So I'm moving on then to item 5, which is the chairman's announcements. Today is actually the last meeting of the panel in this municipal year, And despite the pressures of the pandemic, the panel has continued to deliver its important role to support and to scrutinise the Police and Crime Commissioner on behalf of all our residents. I would really like to thank all the members of the panel and those that take part in the working groups, because I know you do a huge amount of work behind the scenes. So thank you for all your contributions and your commitment over the last year. As you all know, this will be the last formal meeting with Michael Lane as the Police and Crime Commissioner for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. We will be welcoming a new commissioner following the PCC elections on May the 6th this year. So on behalf of this panel, I would like to thank Michael and all his team for their proactive and transparent approach to working with us, the Hampshire panel, and to wish Michael all the best for the future. As a panel, we have chosen to enhance the effectiveness through the inclusion of 2 independent co-opted members. The current term of our 2 independent co-opted members, that's Bob Perkins and Michael Coombs, ends ahead of our next meeting in July. So we'll be shortly undertaking a recruitment process for these 2 roles. More locally, we all noted the appalling attack recently on Dr. Wang in Southampton last month. This attack appears to have been racially motivated. So I wanted to say to many of our diverse and vibrant communities right across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, please be assured that the panel condemns all and any forms of discrimination and hate crime. We have invited the Commissioner to provide an update today on his work in this area. And our recently formed Equity and Diversity Working Group will continue to monitor the progress of the PCC and his office in their commitment to creating communities which are inclusive, caring, respectful and tolerant of others. We also note the shocking murder of Sarah Everard in London and note the concerns of women and girls across the country. I would like to invite the Commissioner to comment on the mechanisms that he has in place in keeping women in this county safe. Thank you. I've agreed to bring forward in the agenda items 8 to 11 today, with items 6 and 7 to be heard after the meeting pauses for a short break. So members, if you're able, I would like to move to item 8, which is the Police and Crime Commissioner's draft annual report. It's on pages 11 to 40 of your packs. The Commissioner has provided members with his draft annual report for 2020-2021, and I would now like to invite James to present this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and just briefly to respond to comments made in your announcements and to confirm that Michael, at the point that he brings his announcements, will be responding to the points that you so well made and the concerns that we all share regarding both the support we choose to give to all those across our area with an ethnic background, and also to those women who are at risk of violence, and so Michael will respond to those. To this item then, each year we bring you the draft annual report, and this year we're bringing it to you slightly early. One of the things that we identified at the transition between the previous Commissioner and Michael was that bringing you the annual report of the Commissioner, as we usually do later in the year, doesn't fit very well with the rhythm of the year. And this year the rhythm, again, as we come to an election, means that we're responding to a new Commissioner, a new plan, and then setting of a new budget. And so our choice this year was to bring it to you, not quite at the end of the year. As you know, we're not quite at the end of March at the moment, and so the report is almost complete, but is in a full enough version as its final draft to offer to you for your consideration. And as always, we ask you for your comments, any points of clarity that you wish us to make, and then to follow that up in writing with us to enable us to be able to provide a comprehensive annual report of all of the work that the Commission has undertaken in the previous year. So, Chair, I'll hand back to you for any questions that the panel have that I can either offer clarity now and then would ask you to capture them so that we can respond in writing.
Yes, thank you, James. I know we have a couple of questions, and I'd like to go to Councillor John Beavis first, please, John.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. My question relates to page 21 of the report, protecting young people online. The Cyber Ambassadors scheme is a real success story, and the report tells us that 40 new schools and colleges have recently joined the scheme, with now 120 schools, the network of some 1,200 cyber ambassadors. And I also note in the report the one-day Safer Internet Day with 7 schools and the Police and Crime Commissioner and the Chief Constable. But I'd like to know how the PCC's Cyber Ambassador coordinators work with the schools and colleges to keep those 1,200 cyber ambassadors engaged, interested and trained. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beavis. And our agreement with you in terms of the quality of this means that in this last year we have further recruited, and so we now have 2 cyber ambassadors who are working with primary and secondary schools specifically and extending into the colleges and the special education needs schools. And both of the cyber ambassadors are now regularly meeting. The challenge of COVID for us all is that we've moved business online, and so a lot of the training sessions that have been delivered and the refreshers that have been delivered have been done online, but that's been consistent and regular. And so the content that we provide, the update of content, the use of social media, these children and young people are obviously very active in the use of social media, and so Marcia particularly, who has led on the primary schools work, uses a social media application called TikTok, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. I'd be surprised if any of you are active on it, because sadly most of us here, probably all of us, are the wrong demographic for that particular social media platform. Nonetheless, the updates, and I would encourage you somehow, and we'll try and support you in this, to be able to see this, because it's really interesting in the way in which information is shared amongst the young people, but it does keep it alive, it does keep it vibrant, it does keep it active, and it's also, because it's on social media, it goes well beyond Hampshire. And I think for us, the success of this is to see Hampshire children and young people kept safer online in a world that's moved in this last year to almost entirely online. I think lots of these young people are looking forward to not being online, but nonetheless, to keep them safe online has been a huge success. But yes, to your question, we use as many different platforms as we can to keep the information fresh, to keep them updated and to review. And so we continue to invest in both the actual people resource to be able to extend this and to continue to deliver training sessions, but also the online resources to be able to keep the message fresh, to keep it current, and to keep those cyber ambassadors enthused and up to date.
Thank you, James.
Yes,
John, are you
yes,
happy with that? Did you have a follow-up?
No follow-up. Thank you, Chairman. Just to say thank you for this, because I think it's a very important part of the work, and it's good to see that there are now so many young people involved in it. Thank you.
Ken Muschamp. Ken, are you there?
Thank you. Yeah, sorry, thank you. I was struggling with finding my mute button, as they say. Good morning. Good morning, James. Now,
Good morning, Councillor.
I just have one overriding question, I think. Thank you very, very much for the detail. We've asked for that in the past. You know, you've given details of all sorts of projects and so on and so forth in the draft report. However, there's only one of them where I can actually find what I would call a definitive, and this was the outcome. This was the so what, and that is to do with the the reoffenders, where it clearly states that 50% of reoffenders, we now will know not reoffend. Whereas most of the others were very much around it aims to, the challenges, and so on and so forth. Now, that's all good. I'm not no decry against that. The snag comes is we have this statement about keeping residents safer. So my residents would want to know, how do I translate this report that says, and that's how it keeps you safer? There seems to be no correlation between activity and outcome.
Thank you very much for your question. It's a valid point, and what I'll do is, before I actually publish this, I'll add a lot more so what's, because as you know, we have a performance and information team that measure the so what, and we put a lot of effort into that. The other thing that that Michael's going to present his end of term report today, and the end of term report it should be entitled the so what report, because what we've sought to do is to actually bring all of the outcomes and all of the achievements together in one report that says, here are your 5 annual reports, but we're going to publish the end of term, the roundup that says, so did the commissioner achieve what he set out to do? And it just sets out in a lot more detail the outcomes. But what I'll do to help, and I think it's a valid point, is that the annual reports will add a lot more so what's into this as well. It'll double up on some, but actually it's a more useful perhaps format for you that will go on to repeat in ongoing years.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I can't ask for more, so I look forward to seeing it.
Thank you. Councillor Bound.
I'm not sure I had a question on this point, did I, Jan? Unless you want to remind me what the question was.
I think you were looking at outcomes, weren't you, from your plan?
I think, yes, I think there was a general comment that it's one of the things we talk about in the working group, because actually there is this reality, isn't it, that says those sorts of outcomes and measurables are really important. And if I thought about one of the things that we talked about at the working group, and that we've had quite a lot of interest in, is the contact centre. So actually having updates on those response times, the number of missed calls on 101, 999, and the development of online reporting becomes really important for both individuals and businesses, as we've discussed previously, James. So again, if we can have those sorts of snapshots so that we can see improvement, I think it's that hard data that becomes really important.
No, and we will ensure that we give that snapshot to you.
Thank you. And then finally, James, I think we have a question from Councillor Andrews around the safety partnerships. Or maybe we don't. Okay, just moving on. This is a great. Hello, Diane, are you there?
Sorry, I beg your
pardon. Did you have a question, Diane?
I did, yes. Page 15, regarding the Safer Communities Fund, which gave nearly 1.5 million to projects. I know that you do consult with community safety partnerships, but I would like to see the relationship with CSPs strengthen going forward, particularly when deciding which partners receive grants, to ensure that the needs of individual CSPs are met and possibly receive feedback even. Do you think this would be possible going forward?
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. The very, very short answer is yes. The slightly longer answer is I'm covering this item coming up with this year's grant round. We have sought in our current form to consult with community safety managers and do ask them to comment on every grant that's put forward. And so, to the best of my understanding and with as much confidence as I can give you, we've got to a point where I'm briefed that we consult reasonably well. For you to ask the question does mean that you feel that there's more to do. And so I would very, very much welcome a further conversation where we can unpack together in conversation. So James, I'd like to do this, please, and that way I can sharpen the way in which we do it. Now, the future with community safety partnerships, we've developed to this point with this commissioner. The next steps was we will have a different commissioner, so we will need to introduce them to you, and at that point I think we can also talk about the ask again in terms of how do we continue to build the relationship, how do we continue to work together. And so I won't say lots and lots more, because I'll pause here, and then when I come to the next item, I'll pick up and carry on with you and answer a bit more of the question, if that's okay.
Thank you, James. That sounds really positive, and I look forward to the chat. Thank you.
Very welcome.
Simon, I can see your hand up. Do you want to come in at this
Yes,
stage?
I'm sorry. I just remembered what my other question was, Jan. Thank you very much. It's absolutely, James, on third-party hate crime reporting centres. And we've had this conversation, and lots of great work's been done to increase the numbers, but it's always been a concern of ours about the distribution of it. And obviously COVID has made some of that work particularly difficult, because lots of those centres, buildings and organisations haven't necessarily been operating. But it's just that sort of point, isn't it, about what work is going on to ensure they start again. Everyone that we had is restarts, but also that there's development as far as the coverage across the county is more uniform.
And we would support you in your observation and agree. The third party reporting centre for us is, we're a facilitator and enabler, but it's a partnership solution. And so as we did when we set off in this direction, we said, if you identify either a partner who would like one or an opportunity you'd like us to pursue, then please identify it for us. As we again step into the journey of a new commissioner, we'll need to unpack for them, what is a third party reporting centre? How do they work? How can the new commissioner actively promote this and enable all of our diverse communities to be able to have access to the opportunity to report hate crime?
You made that statement here, which is very helpful. Will you be making that approach directly to local councils, to community groups, to community safety partnerships?
Without giving too much away regarding the strategy of how to bring a new commissioner into the world of everything that we've done for a number of years now, the brief to them in terms of getting them out and about is, Commissioner, here's a list of things that are on our minds regarding new interactions. Would you seed this into conversation as you meet? Because they'll be meeting a lot of these people either for the very first time or the first time in this role. And so we'll write them a script because I can't think of another way to do it, and say, would they seed this into the conversation to ask the questions and then to bring back opportunities. But again, because it's partnership and because you're one of our set of key stakeholders and partners, again, if there's anything you can identify or anything you'd like us to do or Michael to continue to do while he's here, or a new commissioner to do, then please do contact me directly, because third party reporting, the continued need to make sure that people can, in a way that is anonymous or can in a way that best suits them, report hate crime.
James, I've got a question now from Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Chairman. James, on page 16, around domestic abuse, I'd like to ask a question there, please. I mean, domestic violence support is a subject area which is really close to my heart. And during the period of the pandemic, the incident rates, of course, have increased. So can you or the Commissioner assure us that any additional funding, as you mentioned, that's secured from the Home Office will be enough to effectively support the increased demand? Because I fear, and I'm very grateful that this money's come in, but my real fear is that it just won't be enough.
And can I assure you, will it be enough? I sadly suggest it probably won't. But nonetheless, I think that we come back to looking at, we focus here, it's a top priority for us here. I've got both Alan Hagger, who's the head of commissioning, and colleagues on the line. Alan, it might be worth, if you're there, can you come off mute and just give us a little bit of commentary, because this is an area of business that your team are focusing on at the moment.
Yes, thanks, James. The fact is, I think you're absolutely right. There will never be enough money, but what our responsibility is to do the very best we can with the money that we have made available to us. And at this moment, as you know, Narinder, we are working with partners to look at the best way of allocating the resources that we have, so that we get them, so that it's done as effectively as possible. We're lucky in Hampshire. We've got a good network with our CSPs. We've got a good network with our providers and our local authorities. And we are able to, we have got a lot of information and data about how to invest the money, but will it ever be enough? We do the best with what we have available, and we maximise the resources that we have, particularly at this difficult time in domestic abuse. But we need the partnership to keep working and keep informing us.
Thank you, Alan. James and Alan, I've got now a question from Lee Hunt.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you to Narinda for raising that matter. I mean, I've read through what it is that we're expected to do and looked at it, and I've got officers here in Portsmouth looking at how we will utilise the money that came through from the Home Office. But it seemed to me straight away that is going to create ongoing revenue costs if we do the things that they want us to do, which we will. It's going to create ongoing revenue costs for the council's revenue budgets. So, you know, could I ask then, because we will get a new commissioner, James, that you put a lot of pressure onto the government and say, you know, if these councils do the things that you are asking them to do, including these quite right instructions to look after minority groups of all kinds, that there's going to be ongoing revenue costs. And will you put pressure on the government or ask the commissioner, whoever that's going to be, to try and get more money each year to support what it is they're expecting councils to do?
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. And yes, of course, we'll add it to the briefing process to make sure that as Alan and the team cover the work that we're doing to look at domestic abuse and also the domestic homicide reviews, which is the most horrendous outcome, but does allow us to promote changes in services and service provision. We'll make sure we cover that, and not just for ourselves, but also to add you in as partners to make sure that when because we're going to introduce the commissioner to you, that we cover those each in conversation. And I think that's absolutely essential that each of you have the opportunity to raise your concerns again as our set of key stakeholders.
Thank you so much, James. Right, if there are no further questions, it's a very comprehensive, it's a very large report. So what we've allowed for is a bit more time for you to go away, and if you have any more questions or comments, that you put them in writing to Caroline by Friday the 19th of March, so that Caroline can pull together a formal response from the panel that will then be sent to the Commissioner, and in conjunction with our recommendations on page 11 of the papers. So we'd like to move to our vote, which will be an online vote. And the recommendation in this case will be that the panel receives the draft annual report of the Police and Crime Commissioner for Hampshire, reviews the document and makes any report or recommendation to the Commissioner in line with Section 28, Part 4 of the Police Reform and Social Responsibility Act. And the question should be in front of your screens now, or in the chat room if it's not appeared on your screen. So please could members now vote either for, against or abstain from the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. We have a majority agreement for that recommendation.
Thank you so much, members. So we can now move on to item 9 on the agenda, which is the Police and Crime Commissioner's Safer Communities Fund for 2021-22. We will now receive an update from either James or the Commissioner on the latest rounds of grants funding. James.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to try and put up just a short set of slides for the Safer Communities Fund piece for us as I wrestle with the technology. Okay, So Alan will join me for the questions. I'll just take it through a couple of slides if that's okay, just to update where we are. So just in terms of what you know, every year we run the Safer Communities Fund, and Councillor Andrews highlighted this from the annual report for last year. We again this year run this grant round and the bidding to seek to procure services to reduce crime, prevent offending and reoffending, and to support victims. And that sits right at the heart of the police and crime plan, that we enable everyone to realise their life potentials without being drawn into the criminal justice system. And so this is part of the work that only the Commissioner can do in terms of his beyond policing work. What we've sought to do, and each year we seek to make sure that it is well documented, that people have an appropriate guide that enables them to bid, that they also understand what opportunities are available so that they don't waste their time, that they focus on the area that the Commissioner has identified for the delivery of service. We also do look at it very carefully to make sure that we're not double funding. So in other words, we make sure that the money we provide is creating and delivering these services, and that it's not being doubled up across other commissioning or service providers. And also the Commissioner seeks to identify where the gaps are in service provision and to promote opportunities. What you'll see is that through this process, we offer up to £50,000, and none of the bids have this year achieved that full level, but a significant number of them have received it towards that and a significant amount of funding. We do work hard each year to speak with the community safety managers and the community safety partnerships and to ask them for their endorsement of every single bid that ends up being approved. We've also added to this the violence reduction unit leads, to make sure that we are focusing on local priorities, on key policing priorities, and to look at the national government priorities, particularly in relation, and thank you, Councillor Baines, for drawing our attention to this, the work and the additional funding that is going towards the delivery of sexual abuse services, but also sexual crime and the support for victims of sexual crime. Now this year, as in previous years, we saw a significant number of applications, 93 this year, and just short of £3 million worth of bids, which saw us more than twice oversubscribed again for the money that's available. In going through the process, we've tried our best to talk to the community safety partnerships. We've made sure we've understood the local policing priorities across all the districts, looking at what the district commanders are highlighting, that we have focused on domestic abuse and sexual crime and the commissioners in these areas, that we've also looked at how to reduce offending, talking to those in the prison service. And finally, we have spoken to the constabulary specialist theme leads. So we try to make sure that we consult as widely as we can and to make sure that each year, each of the different key stakeholders have been able to have the input. It is a prescribed process, though. It isn't the Commissioner would like. It is more about, and Michael has been clear to us about this, that it should be a fair and transparent process, that in the guide for applying for funding, there is clear criteria for scoring, and these scoring are adhered to quite rigorously, and that at the end of the process, some of the bids are marginal, and the Commissioner reserves the right to review the ones that are marginal to ensure that the right outcomes achieved and the right blend and level of services to the best of his ability are offered across the whole of the policing area. So we do scrutinise them. We do try to understand the financial standing of each of these so that there isn't a financial risk or a failure to deliver service, and that those bidding clearly understand what the expectation is, that they can afford to deliver it, and that they have the right level of staffing. We also look carefully at the current demographics, the crime statistics, and to do our best to make sure there's a fair and proportionate distribution of that funding across all of the different community safety partnership areas. Now, the challenge comes in terms of when we receive the completed applications. Many of you will know that simply completing an application, it can feel like a bit of a lottery, a bit of a game. but we don't treat it that way. We look at it very carefully to try to understand the service provided and the need that it's going on to support. And we do take into these different aspects into account as we go through it. So we saw this year successful applications of 57 in total, and you'll see that as you go down each of the different areas, these fit in the police and crime plan and focus particularly on areas of domestic abuse and hate crime, and to seek to reduce offending, sexual crime and supporting victims. What you'll see at the bottom there, youth diversion, that sits off the page, and the amount invested and the number of successful applications. This is because we also commission a number of services over years, and that commissioning of services fits into other categories apart from youth diversion. And so the grant round in the given year tends to be skewed towards youth diversion. Here we are. These are just a few of the organisations that will be commissioning services through again this year. And I like this slide very much because it tells the story about how all of the different partners that we seek to engage with fit across the map of Hampshire. So finally, we do take it quite seriously in terms of the performance achieved, what they do on a quarterly basis, how they're working with us, making sure that the outcomes that are defined in their bid are being achieved, so that the money is invested well and that we see very real outcomes and lives changed. We encourage them to work with the community safety partnerships, to engage with our community safety partnerships, and to make sure that that relationship is being built. And I hear and would just continue to respond to the comments by Councillor Andrews that if there continues to be a feeling that this isn't working, then we will ensure more work is done this year to improve those routes of communication, to ensure that the relationships to continue to be maintained and improved. But again, this year, as I looked across the detail of where the services were being provided, that there still seems to be some inequity of service provision across the area at a local level. We do have Pan Hampshire services, and broadly that works. And we do have key service providers, but again, and I highlighted on a previous slide that the Commissioner has the opportunity to reinforce gaps, and we're going to put a focus again this year on understanding why there isn't a universal service offer by the service providers across the whole of the area, and why they focus on particular areas. Some of it's historic, some of it's a concern that it's not cost effective. But nonetheless, making sure that there is a full service offer to all of our districts, to all the community safety partnerships that you represent, is absolutely key. And so again, in terms of our ongoing conversations, these are areas we want to discuss with you individually, to identify where the challenges are, and to look at what opportunities we can continue to weave into this. Now, this commissioning round has been set up by Michael and has done in previous years. And so as we go into this next year, we have the opportunity again to discuss with the Commissioner. We've decided to go ahead with Michael's support in commissioning this year's grants because we want to maintain services. And so we'll be unpacking the service provision, the opportunities, the challenges with the next Commissioner. And again, would welcome your input, your discussion, and an ongoing conversation with the Commissioner as we seek to induct them into their role. Alan's with me today, and so I'm going to hand back to you, Chair, and the panel for questions, and Alan will support me in terms of answering those.
Thank you, James. That's really helpful. Members, are there any questions on this item? I don't know if Councillor Baines or Councillor Andrews want to come back in and make any comment at this stage.
Thank you, Chairman. Just want to say I'm pleased to see the way it's going, and I look forward to working closely with the new Commissioner. Thank you.
And Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Chairman. It was just a comment really about James's comment about, specific service provision in district areas, and whether the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner has actually looked at maybe a consortium-based approach, particularly in relation to things like youth services, etc. So you don't get local groups bidding against one another. There's an opportunity, as with the Supporting Families Programme Commission service in the past, where organisations are actually working with one another.
So I'll ask my colleague Alan, who heads up our commissioning, if he could respond. Thank you, Alan.
At the moment, Narendra, we, as you know, we fund youth support services through the VRU funding, through the grants round, and through the youth offending teams. At the moment, all of that is up for renewal, for review. We've got a comprehensive review going on at the moment because I think that we need to do that more efficiently. That some things need to be commissioned at a district council level, some at a top tier level, and some at a Hampshire level. And I think that the idea of working with our providers to look for ways to make sure that funding may be more longer term, because I think that one of the difficulties with the grants round is that it's annual funding. Now that is appropriate for many, many services, but for some of our providers, I think quite understandably, what they're saying is they want longer term commitments. If we're going to do that, that means that we need a new set of relationships. Now that wouldn't be appropriate for all providers of youth services. Local youth clubs, maybe the kind of like annual grants round with a less of a requirement on performance information may be more appropriate. But for some of our more core services around youth provision, I think that the idea of looking at consortium approaches, going across areas with the agreements of the CSPs, with longer term commitments to funding, I think is something that I would certainly want to see come out of the review that we're doing at the moment. But that's my view. The point of the review is to ask everyone else what they think as well.
Thank you, Alan. Ken, you have a question, please.
Yeah, if I may, just a quick one. I think it's on the last slide we saw with the bullet points. There was, I think it was the last bullet point, something about the successful bids, the community safety partnership that was involved with them kind of gets reported back to. So does that also equate for the unsuccessful bids that there is a report back to the applicant to understand, so they understand why their bid was not accepted?
Yes. Do you want me to go through all of the contacts we have with the CSPs around this? Because it is quite comprehensive. And Councillor Andrews, I totally accept that there's always room for improvement. And I think that that's something we have tried to build in year on year when we review the process with the CSPs. But we do talk to the CSPs in terms of the guide to applying, what should go in there. That's the first part. We then send every CSP receives a redacted application. The information we are allowed to share goes to each CSP before we then meet with them to discuss local priorities and where the applications fit into local networks of provision. We include the feedback in terms of, from the CSPs in the scoring process. And if anyone's interested in this, it is quite a complex process, but please do ask and we will share it with you about how that works into the scoring process. We include the districts and the top tier authorities' strategic assessments in the prioritisation of areas that we want to look at. And also anyone applying for funding is advised to seek the support from their local community safety partnership. And I think that's actually quite an important part, because we want the CSPs involved before any kind of like decisions are made. We want them to actually be kind of like proactively kind of working with their local providers to put applications in. We also meet with all the CSPs through the county strategy group, the district and borough ones through Hampshire, and also the top tier ones through their from their community safety partnerships. And also I attend the community safety practitioners forum, so we get lots of feedback. But I do absolutely understand that 1.5 million is quite a lot of money, and we need to make sure that it's as effectively spent as possible.
If I may, I'll just build on Alan's response. The process that we then, Alan's team, go through in presenting it to the Commissioner and I to understand who's been successful and who hasn't, it's wonderful to see those who've been successful, and that's relatively straightforward. The ones who haven't been successful also hugely matter to us, because they fall into two categories. Some are speculative bids, some are the people we don't know, some are organisations that are newly set up and we go through a particular process in testing them and then feeding back. but some of them are known and some of them are previous service providers, and those are the ones we pay very special attention to, because if they have been providing a service and they do and continue to care for victims of crime and the vulnerable, what we're conscious of is that we don't want to see that service immediately switched off and to see those people go unsupported. And so we make sure that if we aren't able to, because the organisation has changed or they're struggling with funding, our job isn't to keep organisations afloat. Our job is to provide service, and that's really clear. And so we work with them to see if we need to run off. In other words, we need to reduce the service and transition people to other service providers, or we need to signpost to additional support. But whilst the grants rounds are there to provide service and to build partnerships, the focus is on the victims and the vulnerable, because those are the services, they're the people the services provided to. And so in each and every case, we're conscious that we focus on their needs and the services provided to them whilst working with the service provider. It isn't a focus on getting the service, it's a focus on the service provision.
Excellent, thank you.
Just make one more point, Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Alan. Yes.
What's very important is that when I talk about kind of like the grants round, when we talk about the grants round, it is one part of what we do. 70% of what we do is through contracts and through partnerships with mainly with local authorities and others. So the grants round has a very, very important place for certain services for which grants are the most appropriate way of funding. For many other services, the contracts are the most appropriate way of providing funding and support. When we started, when the Police and Crime Commission's Office first came into place, it was all grants. And over that period of time, many funding streams have migrated into contracts. That will probably continue, and I think some of the discussions around youth provision is going to be an example of where we do that. I think we fund stalking support through a very important stalking clinic. I'd like to see that move on to a more permanent funding arrangement in partnership with Health and the Constabulary. So I think that there are still areas, but that doesn't take away from the importance, particularly locally, of many of the grant funded services that we provide, and the appropriateness of grant funding as the mechanism for doing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. That was really helpful. I've got Councillor Dave Shields now.
Thank you, Chair. And I just wanted to reflect a little bit and build on what Alan was saying. I mean, in Southampton, as a unitary authority, a high crime area, sadly, that we've been moving gradually in our own funding more to commissioning, contracting, and rather less on grant aid. And that isn't an easy journey to make, but sometimes it's necessary. And I think the key thing for me is where we can get some longer term commitments through a commissioning stroke contracting route. That helps. It's probably hopefully more efficient. But the other thing is it's about the transparency, and it relates a little bit to the other item, that some of those larger commissioned services, it would be helpful to see the breakdown, if you like, in terms of performance by certainly upper tier areas, so that we can see if there are any gaps there and how we can better align different commissioning budgets. I'm just thinking, when we're working in that space around drug misuse, when we're working with young people, there's other sources of funding other than the Police and Crime Commission. There's never going to be enough, but making it stretch as far as it can through better commissioning at the appropriate local level really helps. So I'd be looking forward to continuing that conversation with you, Alan and James, and with the new PCC about how we can go even, certainly in Southampton, how we can improve some of that. And I've been particularly some of our services, it is a bit frustrating when there's an annual bidding round, when it might benefit from a longer term to give them some ideas about how we can sort of like develop and grow together. So thank you very much.
Alan and James, did you want to comment on that?
I would just like to say to Councillor Shields, I think one example of the way forward in terms of our collaboration between funding agencies, but also for others, is the Violence Reduction Unit. because what we have there is we built up a solid evidence base around youth crime prevention, which we're able to share, not just with each other, but also with Children in Need, Big Lottery, and all of the others. And so everyone will know that all of the statutory agencies are agreed that this is the evidence base and these are the areas that most are in need of investment. And I think that that is a way forward, which we could look to see how we could emulate in other areas of work as well.
And Chair, if I may just comment, I think this is an interesting activity for one of the working groups. I'll allow you to choose which one, because it'll enable us to unpack with Alan and the team a lot more of the detail.
Thank you, James. I have Councillor Bound.
Yeah, just to pick up some of those points, thank you, Chair. Really, because we've started talking about it in the working subgroup, because there's a reality, isn't there, that says I think some CSPs, if I thought about my own experience, found it quite difficult to comment on some of the bids, because actually, in some respects, they're being asked to compare local providers that they know with some county-wide providers that they don't, and they're taking that on trust, or they've heard third hand about the good or bad quality of a service, versus, of course, the need to work more closely, because actually we need to share those skills and competencies as CSPs become more responsible for serious violence. So I would suggest that perhaps it's the working group that looks at some of those as far as how we move it forward, if I may.
Yeah, thank you. James, any further comments?
Just to say, very happy, as you know, to support each of the working groups with their desire to look at different areas of our business. So if Councillor Bound is happy, we'll support, and we'll support Nadia by bringing Alan and myself to unpack a little bit more for the plan working group how we can continue to do that. And I think the focus on ensuring the CSPs are as well engaged as possible should be an aim for this coming year.
Excellent, thank you so much. So members, if there are no further comments or questions, the recommendation on this item is that we note the update on the Safer Communities Fund. So if you're all willing to unmute and agree with that recommendation, thank you.
Agreed, Chair.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Chair. Thank you. I can see we have Councillor Stewart has now joined us, finishing his breakfast, I think. Dave, are you happy for me to continue, or would you like to take over?
No, no, you carry on. You're in the flow, and I'm impressed already.
Oh, bless you. So item 10 is our item on diversity and inclusion. And following a number of high-profile matters raised at both this panel and subsequent meetings, and the recent introduction of the panel's Equality and Diversity Working Group, we've invited the Commissioner and his team to provide the panel with an update today on their approach to enhancing inclusion, equality and diversity, both within the constabulary and right across our communities. So James, I'm handing over to you, I think, again.
Thank you, Chair. I also have Enza Riglio, my deputy, with us today, and I'll do a brief presentation which is based on a slide pack that we've recently shared with the working group, and my thanks to the working group. Fantastic conversation and really strong support from them in terms of the direction of travel. And then I'll hand to Enzo, who'll be able to continue the conversation with the panel and take questions. So as I said, this is a slightly edited version for the sake of the panel. Of a set of slides, and you'll be aware that one of the things that's happened in this last year was a significant investment by the Commissioner, and you'll see in the pack of decisions that this was one of those that he approved, and this was something that we'd been discussing over a number of months last year to respond to issues that were becoming evident through the op focus and then the gross misconduct hearings. And Michael's thoughts were very much that whilst policing delivers excellently across Hampshire, when you want to test a culture, check a culture, respond to continuing to grow, change and develop people, that it needs real investment, that it needs external moderation and external input. And so he committed to the community, but also to the Chief Constable, to make sure that this area was addressed in a way that was clear, that was visible, that was transparent, and that could continue to focus on ensuring that the constabulary provided a legitimate service of policing to the communities and that would continue to build trust. So it covers a huge number of different areas, and to respond to reinforcing the need for visible inclusion, to make sure that it responded to culture, to this thing called banter. I really don't like that word. It's a response. It has response to unstructured, unthought, perhaps conversation. I'm not really sure banter has a lot of space within policing, but nonetheless, police officers are human beings too, and so those unstructured conversations, and for people to understand that everybody is biased. Now, we might not like to think that we're biased, but we all are, and that those unconscious biases often come out in our unthought moments and those relaxed moments, and so there's a need for there to be focusing in on that people speak well and they think rightly about all of the different communities that we see represented across Hampshire. That appropriate leadership, this thing called microaggressions, these things that can go very much unchallenged because they're fleeting and in a moment, to come again, and we put a lot of emphasis just at this moment and have done over the last 12 months on finding a new way and a better way to stop search, to understand stop search, to make sure that it's legitimate, to understand how it's seen and felt by the communities. And I'm sure Enzo will cover that a little bit more up to the end of these few slides. And to think about also use of force. It is across all of the commands and the staff networks, and the PCC is committed to being in it, part of it, and to closely monitor it. And again, this is something that we'll be handing over and supporting a new PCC in terms of making sure that this culture of behaviour is a positive, strong, and well embedded culture that enables people to be and feel included within policing. So we have a 5-point action plan that Enzo and my team have developed to make sure that there's a high level of scrutiny of the constabulary, and this is active, not passive, that there's a full review of the stop search scrutiny processes. And again, this is not left to others. In years past, the IAG have taken responsibility and they will continue to do so, but the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office and the team are much more active in this space. They're taking a deep dive into the training of diversity and inclusion to ensure that it embeds well, that we see an improving and overt culture change across policing, that there's further engagement with all of the community leaders, with partners, with key influencers. And just because we do and we should do that, the OPCC doesn't just look outwards, it also looks inwards to make sure that its structure, its organisation, its policies and procedures, its commissioning models all reflect those things that we expect of others. So we need to be evidently seeing and expecting of ourselves. We also have an indicative timeline for and key actions over the next quarter to make sure that this is embedded and continues to be delivered as we go as an organisation through our own transition. But it's essential to make sure this continues to be delivered. So Enzo has set up an action plan and then this quarterly response. I'm going to take this moment just to hand over to Enzo. If you're there, please, Enzo, come in. And what I'll do is I'll leave this slide up briefly for you to talk to, and then I'll take it down.
Thanks, James. I mean, what I've set out and what I put forward at the last Equality and Diversion working group is this is how we're building on what we started this year and establishing, as James said, a much closer view of equality and diversity in the police's activities. And we've had very positive support from aspects of the constabulary in terms of helping us set this up. For example, you know, if around the end of last year, we were able to kind of fast track some body-worn video scrutiny with the discussion with district commanders from Southampton and Portsmouth. It's an area that the constabulary wants to develop, and we were able to pull together a panel within our office made up of people with different backgrounds to see how officers are engaging with the public. And that did give us a good insight into the range of activities that go on and how people respond to being stopped or being assisted. And the process for that is we're currently working through kind of terms of reference and how we embed that in, because the ambition is that we kind of have those regular touch points on body-worn video throughout the coming year. And the other part of all this for me and for the team is about the feedback loop, because I think that's one aspect that perhaps could be improved on from the work that has been undertaken last year and the work before that that the constabulary did themselves. You know, I want to be sure that an officer knows that when they turn their video on, that there is a possibility that video will be observed by an external group. And then when that observation happens, that the positive and the negatives of that observation get fed back so that there's a process of learning. And I think that's an aspect of all this for me is, you know, when we do this as stop and search scrutinies, when we set up, as we did with the Your View panels, as we call them, where it's not the vetted independent advisory group members looking at stop and search examples, it's students from local colleges. My ambition is that we have people there with the young offender teams being part of this, so that there is the same feedback loop. So, you know, you stop me, this is my perception on how that happened. Can you explain how you're going to change from that experience? And if, you know, to keep it very short, that's really how I hope this year pans out with our engagement with the constabulary, that by the end of it, we feel that there are those feedback loops across all those different aspects of work that you see in the slide pack. Councillor Rourke, I'll probably leave it there because I know time is drawing on.
No, that's great. Thank you so much for that update. I've got a question from Councillor Stewart. Dave.
Yeah, I'm hoping I'm in the right agenda item. As I say, I apologise, I've only just arrived and I'm not quite caught up yet. But if this is in relation to the way the constabulary deals with its diversity issues as a follow-on from the incident in the north of the county, I've written a question down. Happy to whoever answers. The question is, are you assured that the inward focused activities of the work will address issues exposed, and how will you measure this desired outcome? Is the question clear?
Yes.
Yeah. Shall I respond?
Please do. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. I was part of the debrief process. The meeting was on the 26th of February under Assistant Chief Constable Craig Dibden's control. And that's established an action plan across all the different aspects that's arisen from those disciplinary hearings. And the action plan will kind of coming to fruition as this year evolves. And our role and the new commissioner's role in their engagement with Olivia at the Compass meetings, or whichever shape that high-level scrutiny takes, will have to draw that into the conversations, because, you know, the constabulary is looking at itself in terms of, you know, there was a requirement for equality and inclusion training, the investment's been made. So therefore, what change will we see once that investment's been made? In the same way, there's a lessons learned about how aspects of the issues that arose from those disciplinary hearings, how are they not going to be repeated, or how are the circumstances that gave rise to those events no longer in place? And for me, that becomes that one-to-one debate, because it has to be dealt with at that senior level, because it's got to be shown from the very top that change is required and the tangible change needs to be seen. And
Thank you.
That I think is the answer to your question, Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. Dave, have you got any further questions, or are you happy with that?
No, I'm grateful as a comprehensive answer. Obviously, it was such an important issue. I think that the constabulary is rightly focusing on it. And of course, I know my colleague from Southampton will be talking about the diversity group in due course, so I won't steal his thunder.
Yeah, no, that's right. And so if there are no further question, members, if you're happy to note the update on diversity and inclusion from the OPCC, and if you'd like to unmute and just agree with that.
Agreed, Chairman.
Yeah.
Thank
Agreed.
you.
Agreed.
Thank
Agreed.
you. And as we alluded to, so moving forward, we've now got our own Equality and Diversity Working Group. So this will take a lead monitoring and scrutinising progress in this really important area. And the chairman of that working group will be able to provide an update at subsequent meetings going forward, which moves us very neatly onto item 11, which is our updates from the panel working groups. And I'd like to invite Councillor Dave Shields, who chairs the Equality and Diversity Working Group, if he would kindly provide an update for us. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you very much, and hope other members of that working group who are here might be able to chip in. I'll keep the comments brief because we've touched on a number of these issues. And first of all, I'd like to thank you very much for your comments at the beginning of the meeting. It'll be much appreciated by the Chinese community and university and residents in Southampton for the support that you've shown to Dr. Wang, and has been a fantastic community response. There was at very short notice a meeting convened, online Zoom meeting, which had over 300 participants. We've had a survey come in from organised by a sixth form college student at Barton Peveril and Eastleigh, who lives in Southampton, with over 6,000 signatures. It just shows that the extent of the how the community is ready to get behind. I'm very grateful for all the support that you've shown, and indeed to the constabulary, who were excellent. Some of the issues that we touched upon have been already addressed, I think, in the previous item. But the things that stuck out for me, and other colleagues might want to chip in, was obviously there's issues around racial disparity and how that manifests itself in terms of the workforce and in terms of some of the operations like stop and search, which have been touched upon, and how it gets into some quite meaty issues around culture, which is, takes a long time to get that oil tanker around. I thought we had a good conversation. I have to say, throughout, there seems to be a large measure of agreement between the panel members, the working group panel members, and the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office and the Constabulary. We're very much in the same place and looking at together to find how to address some of that. I was also touched, this is my reflection, that there are some important issues, not just around, if you like, racial disparity and some of the issues around ethnicity there, but also lifestyles. We touched upon gypsies and travellers and some of the issues there about nomadic lifestyles, how there's hate that attaches there, which manifests itself perhaps differently. And I know there's a piece of work that James is sort of like taking forward around that, which is something we want to stay in touch with. I wanted to lastly, just the point I want to have, that we had a very useful conversation, and thank you very much to Bob Perkins for flagging this one up, was about the worth of the your view groups, and if you like, the perceived not failings but inadequacies of the IAGs, the independent advisory groups, which Bob Perkins wonders whether we could call them inclusion advisory groups. I mean, they were set up a long while ago to deal with issues at the time, but there is a feeling that they're not as inclusive as they could be to address some of the issues that we'd like to do that. So we wanted to have a conversation there, and we're very much looking forward at our next Equality and Diversity Working Group to have the chair of the strategic chair of the IAG process to come and talk to us about that. I'm going to leave it there if I can, Chair, but I don't know whether Narinda, Diane, Simon or Bob has anything they'd like to add.
Yeah, well, thank you, Councillor Shields. Are there any other comments? No, that's really helpful, and thank you for all the work you're doing on this, and it feels very timely and important, so thank you so much. Pleasure. Moving on, the one of our other working groups is the Plan Working Group, and something I was involved in years ago, and it now runs very smoothly under Councillor Bound, but I don't know if you've got any update, because it's a huge work stream. I'm always really aware of that, so your comments would be welcome. I think he's frozen. He's frozen with a nice smile on his face, but so as Simon's moment is gone, I'll come back to him. There are two other working groups.
No, sorry, Jan. My broadband is being a bit.
Yeah,
difficult,
no,
so
you did warn us. So
all right.
Yeah, I was going to fill for you, but I thought.
It's a very brief update from me. We, as probably picked up from our previous conversation, we spent quite a lot of time looking at the different funding bids, whether that's sort of coming up for the violence reduction units, but also for the Safer Streets Fund, with the Commissioner's commitment to expand that from Southampton, but move that into Portsmouth, into Basingstoke, and really how they can be used, as we've discussed, to enhance collaborative working locally as well across all the partnerships, with some of those challenges, because we've got different local authority landscapes as well between unitaries and higher tier and district councils. We've also looked at bringing to the panel and asking the office to do this in relatively short order, thinking about the changing requirements of the estates. The last time we had the estate strategy was before the uplift, before COVID. So actually, you know, it's timely that we get an update on the estate strategy to see sort of how the strategy has been impacted and what the plans are going forwards. And also, again, picking up on something that we've already said, the importance for us to have an update on how response times are changing for 101, 999, so that, again, thinking about one of the important indicators for any Police and Crime Commissioner will always be confidence in the service. And as the biggest touch points for most of our residents, understanding how that is working and improving is really important.
Excellent, thank you, Simon. Do any other members of the Plan Working Group want to add anything at this stage? No, everybody's happy. Thank you so much. Our other two subgroups, or committees, if you like, are the Finance Group, which had a huge amount of work to do recently, but presumably now has less to do. So, Michael, I don't know if you wanted to add anything at this stage.
No, thank you, Chair. The next meeting is next month. So, as you say, it's a quiet period after the budget.
Brilliant, thank you. And also then our complaints subcommittee is chaired by Bob Perkins. But Bob, I know there have been some changes to the complaints. It seems to have gone quiet from my perspective. I don't know if you've got a very brief update you'd like to share with us.
I think Bob's left the meeting, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Excellent. So moving on then, we have our final item before the break is item 12, and this is our own work programme, which is detailed on pages 41 to 46. This work programme follows the panel through for its municipal year, and I just wondered if any members have any questions. It's a fairly standard. We've got some items of interest and ongoing sort of threads that we're following through. So I don't know if anyone's got any comments they want to add. Looks like everybody's happy. So the recommendation then is that the work programme is agreed. If members could unmute and agree, please.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Right, we've come to the end of the first part of the panel's business. So Caroline, if we could now pause the webcast and we
Thank you, and thank you, members. Item 6 is the Police and Crime Commissioner's announcements, and I'm pleased to welcome the Police and Crime Commissioner into our midst virtually, and I'll invite him to make his announcements.
Okay, thank you very much. Hopefully you can see and hear me, and I have a neutral background so that people aren't distracted by trying to read the volumes on my bookcases. I thought I'd start in response to the earlier part of the meeting by just giving you a couple of stats that I'll come back to in a brief minute at the moment. So the last 6 months of 2020, there were 218,000 non-emergency calls, that's 101, onto the system. The average speed to answer emergency calls was 5 seconds. The number of those actually I haven't got the totals, but they're about 18 to 20,000 and sometimes a bit more in the high periods per month. The bit that I'll come back to, or well, in fact, I'll say it now. The 101 ones, they remain 60% of the calls, give or take a bit, are not related to policing, which is an issue that we need to resolve long term. But the response times have come down from a year ago, too many of them at about 2 minutes to 22 seconds is the average answer time. The service level agreements for 999, 96.06% are achieved. Currently from 63% for 101, we, in those last statistics, were over 90% response times within the target, and the average response time is 22 seconds. I just thought, because there were several questions about response times and you were keen to understand it, I should make the point that that's an operational matter. It's one that I scrutinise regularly and routinely, and also the underpinning processes. The digital programmes are related to that and really key. But the management of operational deployment, the resourcing of the control centres and the response to that are operational matters for the Chief Constable to respond to. But there are figures available, and certainly if the panel is keen to understand those, they have been and can be provided, but they're 22 seconds. And I want to come on to something really important that in a way I would have said first, but because I'm talking about response numbers, I want to offer just a small word of thanks. I quite often find myself in front of all sorts of community groups and people who volunteer to be proactive in the community. One of those groups is Ringwood Parish Council, with whom I had a meeting the other day, and they were robust in their challenge of me. They just stood a little bit shy of being aggressive with it, but that's quite right. They were expressing on behalf of their constituents concerns that they had. And Councillor Philip Day, I want to give him a shout out. He was very strongly complaining about the response times from the non-emergency number. And I gave him some of the figures, very specific figures for his area, and he was not persuaded. And in the meeting, this is the cheerful bit, he phoned 101 to see how it went, and he admits to it being slightly under 20 seconds to get a reply. And the reason for saying that at all is because he then did what I believe the panel should do, does do, and I would like to reinforce and others should do, is he then said he was surprised by that, and he said the services have improved out of all recognition from his start point. And then he took that further forward and he went out to the communities that he serves, and it caught some traction in the local press, which is helpful, to say it's better now, please continue to report or come back to reporting things because that's so important. And so what I just have started with, because you were asking the questions about some stats on emergency, non-emergency numbers, to give you a little bit of context for that. And The encouragement, I do recognise and have always recognised that our reputation takes longer to rebuild after it's been damaged, and that lots of people, every story of delay, every story of dropped calls, and it's 2.9% is the maximum number of dropped calls recently. That still, every one is potentially something of risk. It includes those that drop because their problem has already been solved, but nevertheless, if there's a call that's not answered, that's an emergency call or an important report that will contribute to intelligence and deployment, then those, none of us should be comfortable with those, and I'm not, but it is much better now. On really key things, and again, I'll pick up. You've just had a diversity and inclusion presentation, and I make no apologies for having invested another significant amount of money, and you will have seen that as one of the options in the budget at our last meeting together. But I was, like I believe everybody, of due conscience and appropriate care for our community, deeply distressed by the story of Dr. Wang. And the point of context for a police and crime commissioner is not only to be distressed by that particular, and I'm glad that the look of it for him, he recovered relatively quickly, but the awfulness of those kind of events is way too much present, and it takes a long time to change it. Dr. Wang suffered from something of visual identification that allowed people to misunderstand the quality of the person, that allowed people to expose the awfulness of their behavior, and to do something that's just unacceptable. That's the only word for it. But the importance for what I have to do and what I have to pass on as a legacy to my successor to continue, because this is not a short-term measure, is to make sure that we invest in changing the culture, in changing the behaviors, the opportunities for people to learn inclusive behaviors, to learn to be vibrant communities, to learn to, in having freedoms themselves, to respect other people's freedoms, in wanting themselves to be respected, to be inclusive of other people who wish to behave in a slightly different but compatible way to create vibrant communities. And so I thought it was absolutely right for all of the comments being made about that. The exceptional partnering that came together to intervene, to reinforce, to support. The great sadness about that outpouring of appropriate behaviour is that it was necessary, and to respond to something that is not acceptable and what we want to see. And I sometimes say it's like being thrown in a well to start your journey and having people pour buckets of water down on you. What we want to do is to draw up the water to create the inclusive communities we need. And those things, several of you have mentioned about the long-term nature, the reliability of funding, the length of time to restore reputations and the need to intervene. All of those are underpinning quality and fundamental importance for what we have. If I've very briefly, and it's not because that makes it done, talked a little bit about the engagement with diversity and said that it resonates with me and is a daily part of the priority that we put to move forward. The next one I want to talk on is, again, topical. And the topicality of it is not really what I want to press. The topicality allows us to get out messages, allows us to access people, but the topicality of things that are awful and the violence against women and girls, that element of it is a long-term canker on the appropriateness of inclusive behaviours, of vibrant communities, of the need for us to educate and coach and train and take personal responsibility. And I acknowledge the pressures of vulnerabilities and threats to women and girls in our society. I have from day one and will hand over more work to do, but hope to have made some difference. As a matter of course, our constabulary deals with 108 domestic abuse incidents and 51 violent crimes a day, many of them against women and girls, numbers that are sadly reinforced by the recent events. Finding long-term solutions is the point that I've made, will mitigate these by altering unacceptable behaviours amongst some men that create these risks, and it remains and must remain a priority. And the achievement of extra funding is a mitigation of it. It's not the full answer. And I think Councillor Shields was making the point, and others will make the point of all political party persuasions and none about that is it enough. The answer for that in resource terms is that we must do all we can to maximise the effectiveness of the funds we've got, to prioritise them. And in some halcyon days that people may remember, I don't really, when you were looking at dispersing funds, you did all the essential things and then you had some choice about what you did with not huge, but some money left. We are at a point through nobody's design or intention, no party political element of it, although party political views are allowed, of course they are in a political element, but I serve everybody with a degree of neutrality that doesn't ignore the fact that I was elected as a Conservative and that people voted for me, some of whom knew nothing about me other than the label that was on there. But as a Police and Crime Commissioner, my job is to serve everybody. And the position we find ourselves in, which answers some of the other questions that you were asking beyond policing and including policing, of doing the best we can, and the triaging of what we can do includes things that in any more helpful environment, if we were wealthier as a nation, if the tax take was greater and available to us, we would unhesitatingly have absorbed into what we're doing. And it's one of the things that made such a difference from your last meeting. And you don't need my thanks as a panel. You're there to scrutinise me and check where I'm going. That's entirely fine. But I do want to commend the last meeting, which was single item, because it concentrated and gave a voice. Those of you who chose to speak out loud told me of, and told the public, most importantly, of the concerns and pressures in coming to a conclusion to unanimously support me in setting the budget and the council tax rise for this coming year. It was my job to make sure that all of that money of the rise came out of a presentation from the Chief Constable where I had demanded that our local communities who are putting their hands in their pockets would see the benefit. That challenge from me, supported by your questioning, I have evidence from the people that write into us, phone in with us, engage with us on social media, was a thoughtful presentation that helped them to understand why I made the decision, but was supported by so many of you who properly were questioning whether it was necessary. Why they heard from the Chief Constable that she was challenged and tested for the value of what she was doing from a start point of no council tax raised. And when we put that together, that was an example of when panels can deliver at their best, when the challenge of presenting to you to not get your formal approval, but to get your support in a decision that is mine, is one that is added value. And I want to say thank you for that. Outcomes-based processes that you were asking about in the course of, actually you ask almost from the beginning that I've arrived here, and still ask about making sure that all the actions that we take have smart objectives that we can test and measure against. I just want to, in very brief terms, say I absolutely endorse that. It has been a priority for me. I understand my predecessor setting up an organisation. I understand an organisation that tests the commissioning grant process, the grant bid process, that says, is this a good idea? And we very rarely get things that are not good ideas because they get sifted out, some word like that, earlier on. But the process of finding the right things is really key, and it has to be outcome based. And I just want to reinforce a little bit as I think Alan Hager was saying, and can talk forever about it if you have the time and want to pursue about it, because he has a rich background and a depth of understanding of the dotted line cross of T. But the focus for me has always been that sense, which he only briefly mentioned, of the difference between contracting and therefore sustainable continuation of services that we go to, and the grant making process, which I believe from fairly early on in my time, and it was really clear to me this time in looking at the Community Safety Fund grants process, I need to be looking for the people who may not be fantastically skilled at putting a submission in, but have innovation and connection in our communities that says this is how to address a real need that would make a big difference and a big benefit for our communities. And it's why the grant process could so easily be spent on the headline figures of all the things that we do and are slightly short of funds for. And it has to shift that way a little. The bit that I firmly believe must be sustained is that ability to look at ideas that are novel and innovative and may just give us a trial that will tell us something that works in our communities for a disproportionate benefit for the cost of implementing them. And so I just wanted to make that point. And lots of you were asking about partnerships and the engagement. I hold firmly and believe I would recommend on any day to people that there are the things that a police and crime commissioner should lead and needs partners for, and partnerships where the police and crime commissioner can add value. We all know about the violence reduction units, and it has something of real value, both from a national point of view and fortunately locally from that view. 18 months, 2 years ago and longer, we were challenged by those in government to create partnerships. And quite often they were listening to others who have a commissioning element saying, we plan to do this. And some in government would say, that's great, get on with it. That's a really good thing to be doing. But if we create added value partnerships, that's really what it seems to me it's about. And in response to probably the things that you were saying earlier, it's probably right for me to say there is something about reputation in the world at the moment. Because the world is a big topic, I'll actually say there's something about reputation for policing. We have in our area had some awful examples of unacceptable behaviours, unacceptable actions, criminal and gross misconduct that are related. Those things take a long time. I choose to say this out loud and on record. Those things often take so very long to come to account. And for the community who may well know something of the events that have happened that damaged the confidence that they have in policing, to wait and wait and wait and wait, and the resolution of that is something that is on my mind. Of course, we need to be fair and just to all those who allegedly have something argued against them. But there is something about understanding both the processes that do that has been on my mind, and it's partly why the complaint system has changed. And however significantly effective large parts of the PSD team looking at internal processes for complaints have been, the look and feel of it had outgone the time when that was appropriate. It is a resource issue, but it is a key added value to have enough focus on a very small number. I need to be clear about that too. But too many to just say it's one. I mean, I usually use the analogy of one bad apple in a barrel. There is too much in culture that needs to modernize and change. There are too many examples of things that go wrong. And it's why I come back to what I was saying about that investment for the longer term. And again, I think I do understand the minute by minute process of being a politician a little bit. I do understand the minute by minute operational tempo. But I believe the Police and Crime Commissioner's job is to be strategic and long-term, looking to create sustainable options to keep us all safer, to sustainable benefits, to improve circumstances that allow people to realise their ambitions in a free, engaged society where respect for others means that you will receive in return the right and due respect for the things that you wish to do. I probably am conscious of time, but you'll forgive me if I'm talking about 5 years and the long-term processes. I may take another few minutes or so. I want to talk about a couple of things that are successes. We do understandably talk about the things that go wrong, and it's right to do and care about them. But I believe one of the things that I've tried to press for is that we understand what works and replicate that, as well as auditing, monitoring, and doing the things that have failed. I do believe we need to celebrate and remind people of the general safety we have in our area and the opportunities that we have in our country. But nevertheless, I do understand how minute by minute, and for the victims and the vulnerable people, the concentration on what's gone wrong is absolutely essential, and the first thing I care about, I think. But first of all, County Lines, the intensification week. I hope many of you will have seen the press. What I wanted to just briefly say is sometimes the Police and Crime Commissioner is not understood to have a footprint and a concern about international, national and regional elements of what goes on, although we are, by the Hampshire Constabulary area, a region ourselves, pretty much. And quite a lot goes on that I engage with to find appropriate funding, and quite a lot of mutual aid and cross-boundary work goes on. And the County Lines Intensification Weeks just recently have been really key. Criminals don't respect county or even country borders, and it's therefore essential that security and policing agencies collaborate across the spectrum, internationally, nationally, regionally and locally, as they did in the cases that I hope you've all seen in Southampton, in Portsmouth, at sea with the Royal Navy's interjections into the drug supply lines, and for the intensification weeks. This disruption will have saved many lives locally and protected vulnerable people from being exploited and becoming victims. And quite a lot will continue to be invisible to the public and not on their mind, which is why the celebration of successes and the ability to share those with the community, I hope, will add to that reassurance element that good work is going on. It saw 17 suspected dealers in drugs arrested, targeting individuals who ran either local or county lines, crossing borders, supplying crack cocaine and heroin. The officers arrested 100 people, seized 82 mobile phones, and the ability to look at the numbers in those and track back where people are ordering drugs, but importantly to have some impact on these serious and organised managers and owners of these things that are often not in our local area. We removed £1 million worth of drugs and almost £53,000 in cash, which is a local short-term disruption to supply. But those international and national elements removed supply massively, and I believe it would be right for us to wonder and be curious about whether we managed to find some more senior people to sit alongside those runners on the county lines processes, those who are victimised. And in our local element, the neighbourhood officers visited cuckooed addresses across the force, with 42 vulnerable people being identified and 6 safeguarded. I come back to, you like the numbers sometimes, and the outcome numbers. It is really, there are some cases that we can describe what the numbers are, and I've just, those ones are in the public domain. And so I give you some numbers about that. There's one to counterpoint that, because I think quite often there are the processes that the James's team have to deliver that are statutory requirements and about engagement with the public that are less visible in the tempo of this awful thing happened, what have you done about it? This awful thing wasn't prevented, why not? These expenditures are going ahead, and they're quite right to test those as well. The success I thought I would highlight with you is I spend a lot of time, I believe I'm responsible to the public, and I wish to be open, transparent, visible, accountable, auditable, but also to send messages that matter. My team are no less keen on that and work hard on it. It's therefore good for me, at least, and I share with you that recently we were audited by an independent national organisation, unannounced, and we only got the results after they'd done their research, where they awarded us a transparency quality mark for our compliance with transparency and disclosure requirements that are set out for PCCs in legislation and Home Office guidance. If it's legislation and guidance, I would hope as a governance matter we would do it. What I liked more, and I think my team liked more, and I am pleased for them that they've had this. For the first time, the review also included an ease of use assessment, so that as well as being present and timely, information also had to be easy to find by a member of the public. It's good to have this external confirmation of achieving our ambition to be open and transparent, and neither I nor any members of my team are other than conscious that we work for the public. The things that pay our salaries, the money that we disperse is not my money, it's not their money. It's their professional skills that are brought to bear to make it clear to the public so that they can have a view about the value and the outcomes that come from it. I may go on just a little bit to say it is, and there are two more quick bits of this. I do want to, this is recorded and it's findable as a description, and quite often there's a lot about challenging me and hearing my answers from your excellent questions. I want to be on record of saying thank you to my team. I hope you all know from your business generally and from your engagement with them for working groups just how much work they do to support your work and your scrutiny of us. It is significant at a time when all of my team are stressed, and they're quite a small team. And I just want to reassure them, like everybody in this country at the moment, but around the world, with people who are living with the pandemic, living with the pressures of work, living with pressures that come from not quite enough money or significantly underfunded to do all that they would naturally professionally want to do, how proud I am of my team who've stepped forward, who've managed flexibility in their working lives to ensure they continue to provide added value to keep our communities safer, to create systems, to do the governance work that is required of them. And they have my grateful thanks. It's not that I won't tease them and test them with having more ideas than we can legitimately do, but I know every day and all the days that they work how much value they add. And I want also to say this thank you. And I could say my thank you to my team privately, but I need to share that with you. And I want to say to people who go, what are this team working on? They're working on protecting them. But this is the big thank you outside of here to anybody who might bump into this recording, to those of the press or others who may read it. The thank you that's in my heart and in my mind is to the members of the public, all of those people in our communities that I serve, all of those people that are victims and vulnerable. For every time that I can get a service to them and it can protect them, I'm grateful that they could find their way to those services and had the courage to do so. For every time they've complained or enabled me to hear what the issues and the risks are that they face, that is added value to I and my team and all of our partners to be able to find and focus where they are. And I am absolutely clear that as a Police and Crime Commissioner, my mandate comes solely from the trust or the hope that I would be able to deliver for them that came from that community that voted for me. And I absolutely, from the first day that I've arrived here to the last day, and we're not yet at the last day, but approaching it rapidly for me in this job, have worked as hard as I can to the best of my ability, knowing that I thank them for giving me this opportunity to serve them. I just wanted to say that. I think you might see a slide in a second that shows, this is one I hope you will all recognise because it was part of the budget element. I can't quite tell if it's being shared. Can I see? Click, 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 click.
Slides are being shared.
Okay. So click forward a bit, James, if you would. Next one, that one. So back one. I just wanted to say that it's been an honour to serve as the Police and Crime Commissioner. This will, when I go, disappointingly to me, not the going, it's a due election, but I will only have achieved 49.5 years of public service. But this is a pinnacle for me of the ability to serve the communities I care about, to bring whatever skills I have and whatever engagement I have to making a difference, to keep people safer, to create community, to create inclusion, to create opportunities that people can take that won't be disrupted by those who wish us harm. And that's why there has been one overriding purpose and core to my job from the first day until now, when I've sought to add value. I recognise the journey and the issue of arriving and understanding this job, creating a plan in the first bit, seeking to understand the absence of investment and creating investment, and then building on that to deliver progress with, again, what you challenged me for, and I know the community challenged me for. So what's it all add up to? That the physical description of the investment that we make, and then the very specific, this time in the represented in the council tax leaflets, the very specific auditable tests of what they can expect to be delivered, what the Chief Constable has promised her constabulary will deliver, that are auditable, able to be scrutinised and able to be demonstrated as having been delivered. And it's a journey, and I do give respect to my predecessor who set this up. He and I are not that similar in what we might have chosen to do, but I respect him for winning that first election and being, for all time, the first Police and Crime Commissioner. My job has been to do all that I can on every occasion I can to make a difference for our communities, to keep them safer, that hallmark of what I set myself as the test for everything, and more specific test for the specifics of what we do, so that my successor can build on foundations that I've built and continue that journey of further increase in safety, further interventions that make a difference. And if you were to look in the pages beneath that, I think it's right to say that I do understand the engagement with what is a day in the life of the constabulary. How is it that 95% plus of all our money goes towards policing? And that becomes the almost sole agenda of what a PCC does. The money is right, it needs to go, that's the proportion it should go. I would like to see in the future a doubling of the much smaller sum of money or more that goes in beyond policing, that reduces demand on policing, that creates opportunities for people to realise their full potential. That is about the partnership engagements with the Criminal Justice Board, with the Local Resilience Forum, with the upper tier authorities' agendas where they lead in many of the services that are so critical to our communities and populations within our communities, so that I can be supportive of those professional leaders in their particular professional skills, but also add value in terms of the partnerships that we can create, because I have a remit, my job has a remit across a broader geography and can bring people together in collaborative approaches. And again, I know you touch on that in some of the discussions that you have. It is a journey, and I just want to repeat for reinforcement, really. While it's right to reflect on the purpose of this presentation is to say that there is a appropriate review of the end of term, the what did I set out to do, how did I do it, what can I celebrate as success? Well, it's right to reflect on that. It's important to know what works, to build on what works, to keep us safer and enable us all to pursue our potential. But it's also right to acknowledge that there is more to do to protect all, including the most vulnerable and those whose circumstances disadvantage their prospects. Whoever we are, if we are fortunate, and I know that sometimes I can look, I'm wearing a suit at the moment and a nice badge. I have a job that motivates me every day, and some of the titles I've held before in my career, it wouldn't be wrong for people to think I have some degree of success and comfort. But it hasn't always been that, and it is always on my mind that some people are disadvantaged by the life circumstances they inherit or the changes in their lives that make a difference. And it is one of the reasons that I have been so determined to look long term. When we were looking at the vision for policing, when I arrived, people were talking about at best 2025, which is almost tactically here now. Trying to get that out to 2035 and beyond is not to avoid the immediacy of the work that needs to be done, but it is to ensure that those things that I do are things that I would inherit if I was my successor or my successor's successor, as something that in their time made a difference. And for me, that has always been important. And I'm conscious that, again, the nature of the job doesn't make that as immediately relevant to many of those in our communities whose challenges are nearer to their front door or in their personal space. In the years that I've had the privilege of doing this important work, there are a number of things that I've sought to do to protect and then fund increases in local policing, as well as the necessary support and enabling of that support. I'm really clear that visible policing and evident descriptions that the community understand of what local policing does are so important. Using foresight and maximising opportunities as they're presented, we've enabled the recruitment of new officers at scale, and investment in staff and contact management means the 101 are now much better answered. From the very beginning, I looked to take risk with our reserve funds, which are all allocated, just so that we're clear, for things that will cost us money in the future, and they are a savings mechanism to ensure that when we get there, there's not an empty safe for the costs of those things that will be sustainable to keeping us safer. But I can use that money creatively to enable things. And one of the first couple of things that I did was to hear from the front line of policing that tasers mattered to them. And the more that we were single crewing, or the more that people were deploying to uncertain issues, the more they were reassured by having amongst the tools that they could have taser. And it was really important to do that. And I've continued to take that approach right up until today. And for me, for example, the investment in welfare, the investment in the diversity programs that were part of this year's budget, and the opportunity to protect some money on a call-off basis, to reserve some call-off basis for small projects in the digital environment that can be delivered at speed in a number of weeks, with a business case for the fairly immediate payback in benefit to our front line to go ahead. And so for me, that's been an approach that I'm keen to take. It doesn't always grab the headlines, but it is the right thing to do. And in that sense, we've protected Country Watch because our rural communities need someone's able to bring expertise and to share that expertise with people who might deploy to reinforce in that area. And I take the same response to the specifics of needing appropriate modern armories, training facilities, and engagement to make sure that if we rehearse and train and equip properly, then our officers can go forward, supported by police staff with expertise, supported by volunteers and specials, of course, as well, can go forward confident that they are as well prepared and enabled to go forward. And it's part of that is my challenge to the Chief Constable. You know, don't just tell me what you think we can afford. Tell me what you need to be operationally effective and efficient.
Michael, just intervening a second. I'm mindful of time. I don't know if you're aware. Just only some members have got to go, so I just don't want to lose sight of that. Just update you.
So skipping through, the digital world has a massive investment. The Police Investigation Centre's massive investment. I am entirely certain if I hadn't asked the public, if I hadn't asked the local councils, if I hadn't asked the Chief Constable, if I didn't have a team that knew how to build one and were ready to go, I could not have acquired the land and completed those buildings. And it relies on our estates team to do it. And I know you want to review what the estates team are doing, and they are changing as COVID has allowed us to do as well. If we skip forward to the next one, go faster, if you want to go faster. It's about partnership, isn't it, and beyond policing, and I maybe have done that. Some numbers for you, because you're keen on numbers. Every year, 70 projects. That's the reason to be innovative, the reason to keep them not in the contracting environment. For those of you who are asking, we're not certain every year how much money we get. And it's I hope it will continue, and we make some assumptions about its continuance, but it is about having projects that are both local, that are thematic, and that add value in the moment. And so the community safety funds and the processes for that are different from the long-term contracting of the necessary long-term resources. Victims Care Services in my time has gone from 28,000 people a year supported to 180,000. Restorative justice has extended in its scope and extended the depth of the skills that are there, because the more people you include in it, the more you have to be clear that the right professional expertise is available to people who are making decisions in the most challenging of environments about what they might accept as an engagement. And they sometimes in restorative justice can be risk as well. And it's a important part to say occasionally the professional advice should be to someone who will grasp at any straw that might improve, that it's not for them at that time. There are now 70 third-party hate crime reporting centres. There was a question earlier about, are we checking that they're in the right place? It was a volunteer element and an outreach, so we were accepting people, so there's more work to do in that. But what I can reassure you is that this time of COVID, I rewrote with colleagues a plan, and my first instruction to the commissioning team was to go out immediately, as soon as we knew there was this COVID risk in a significant way, to say, what can you continue doing? What do you need, so that you're not looking back at us to say, am I going to get more funds? But you're going forward to serve those in the front line who are your service users. And we asked them, if you can't continue, tell us that. If you need to tune what you're doing and change what you're doing, tell us that. And we'll try to make sure throughout that time. And it's the same approach. You were asking a question earlier about the recovery element of it. I'm really keen on the cyber ambassadors. It is a request-led process, which is a real compliment to the people that deliver it for us. Young people who deliver to even younger people, who deliver something that schools and those in charge of education establishments and more widely now to are asking for us to engage with. And it's quite right that we've expanded the team a little, doubled it in size from 1 to 2, and supporters, and that's there. You asked about fighting for funds. I make the point that I, in the old days, walked the corridors in London, the departments up there. I do that digitally just as much now and have done, to try and make sure that we are ready to go and ready to stop if the money becomes constrained, to know that we don't hurt ourselves more than we should in those constraint circumstances, but also that we have the business cases ready to go if there's an opportunity. And VRUs was a prime example. we were already understood what it was that the requirement looked like, and when there was an opportunity to bid, we were able to, without changing our purpose, without changing our understanding of our community's vulnerabilities and the risks they were facing, to match the funding bid requirements very quickly. And as a result, we got a positive result, which I'm proud of my team being able to do, and proud of, a little bit. I'm proud that I had set that process in hand. Underpinning everything that I've said so far, just in fact, is partnership for mutual benefit and common purpose. Sharing common purpose and themes for community protection with partners, seeking always to ensure that taking a whole system approach to delivering outcomes will maximise the benefits for the public. You've seen the slide that's in front of you, that's a day in the life of. There's quite a lot of statutory requirement, quite a lot of professional skills that return policing to the front line who were otherwise doing it. And there's quite a lot of lobbying in the areas to ensure that policies support us and become sustainable. Some of you were asking about the risks that we take. I don't think you said Uplift, which is a 3-year programme. The funding for the first year was fine for the first year. We predicted that that might come up and took some risk. I took some risks financially. The Chief Constable took some risk in recruiting people. The second year when it came up, we did the same. The third year, we understand will be funded. But there is a 30-year continuation of cost process that goes on. That is a challenge for government in these economic times. And it's why, again, I thought you understood the need for us to look longer term, 5 and 6 years ahead, to ensure we had a midterm financial strategy, to understand that the risk to us if that funding was not available or less funding was available, and to take the opportunities that were presented. I think so plan for a future. If you didn't notice this on the way through, I am one of the few who wrote a brand new plan for this COVID time. I thought it was appropriate to, it was a matter of duty for me to continue for the extra year, but it wasn't the continuance of normal times and normal processes. There'll be a review of how we did during this time, but I'm proud of what many of my team have done. Against the odds sometimes. I'm proud that I was able to support and bring the experience of the 4 years before to thinking seriously about what's needed now, and I have done my very best to set up whoever takes over from me in due time what they would do. This is many people's favourite photograph of my entire time, including one that I like immensely. It was a conversation where I was completely absorbed with the young people that were around me, and a very happy moment. It had the byproduct, just so some of you might know, that there was some appalling graffiti outside that school. You might switch to the next slide, James. And one of the people, not the person in that image, said, I was asking them, what did they hope for in the future? And one of them, it's a description of partnership, really. One of them said, I'd like the awful graffiti as I walked into school this morning to be removed. And do you know that's not really my responsibility? You could say at one level, I was there on a visit, someone must be able to do that, the school or whoever it would be. But I thought, if I don't take the opportunity, and one of the entertaining things is the number of people's phone numbers that I have. And I was able to phone some people in the City Council. I was able to phone policing. I was able to phone a number of agencies and say, is there any way you can help? By the end of that day, some really awful examples of graffiti that is abusive and not at all inclusive of the range of our communities was actually removed. And
Michael, I shall need to, unfortunately, because of time, I will
stop.
need to say, well, yeah, I feel bad stopping you because I don't want to, because I know it's your last post.
Okay, my last sentence, we were later than we were. Please get people to vote on the 6th of May for the Police and Crime Commissioner election. It is really important that between now and then, any of you that can tell people what the Police and Crime Commissioner does so that people vote intentionally for someone who can do the job, which is a big job, with lots of money and lots of impact on the community, the better it will be. And I hope my successor will be even better than me and do even more fantastic things to keep us all safer. Thank you very much.
That's okay. There's two things to do. First of all, having accepted that annual end of term report there, I just wanted to check that the panel's noted it and they have no questions. Can't see any hands for any questions. So first of all, thank you for that. I'm just going to virtually call the meeting to a close, but just a couple of comments I want to make. And this is to the whole panel, and I'm just and to yourself, Commissioner. We're now coming also to the end of this panel's period. So in July, with the elections in May, as the Commissioner indicated, we will have a new panel. And it's relevant, first of all, to thank, I think, to the Commissioner for his service. And I'm sure whatever his next steps are in his life, he gets fulfillment out of them because he served for a long time as the Commissioner. And as he said, an extended period. I also want to thank the police, through you, Commissioner, for keeping us safe. I don't think any of us will have experienced something like this pandemic in our lifetime. The tragedies, the stress, the mental health impact, there's so many things we can all say. But one of the things I know, and I'm sure other members have experienced, is that our police have done a great job in keeping us safe. And if that's not a priority, I don't know what is. So grateful for that. I also want to thank Caroline, our police and crime panel officer, who has done an amazing job. I regularly, with Jan and others, have meetings with Caroline, and she just makes it so smooth. You forget all the things she's doing, and I can see lots of nods from the panel, Caroline. So I think what you're getting is a very big thank you. If nodding's the best way to do it, or clap and nod at the same time. Well done. I want to thank all the members for your time and commitment. As chair, I see all the members, I engage with you, and I know you do a fantastic job of actually representing your communities of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. And I know you wear many hats most of the time, but for the panel perspective, it's been terrific to work with you. If we just look ahead, we will have a new Police and Crime Commissioner. We don't know who that will be, but we will have one. That person will come with their own ambitions and aspirations, I'm sure. Maybe a greater level of engagement with the fire service, we don't know. Maybe more engagement with the devolution agenda, we don't know. Maybe a greater involvement with the post-pandemic recovery, which is a big area in itself, and we don't know. So I think there's a big different future coming, but I feel very fulfilled the panel will do the right thing. Now, July will see the new panel formed, and it's an opportunity, it's an absolute opportunity to refresh commitment going forward. From my perspective as chair of the panel, and I've been with it since its inception, I have seen this panel develop over time. We've had some really positive things we've introduced. Our proactive policing through the panel has gone down really well and has become a national example. And I'm really, really proud of that. And I think when Caroline and others have gone to national conferences, we certainly have got a good status as a police and crime panel. And I hope that will continue. So with all of that kind of wrapping the picture up, can I just say personally, thank you very much, members. And I suppose to quote Vera Lynn, you know, we meet again. We will meet again, we will see one way or another. But for now, I wish you all well in whatever you're doing up to and including May. And I genuinely, on behalf of the community of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, thank you everybody for the work you've done. So we note the Commissioner's end of term report. I've concluded it there. Can you just indicate if you're happy to note the report of the Commissioner? Lots of nods. Now, the next meeting is scheduled for the 2nd of July. 2nd of July and that will be the panel's annual general meeting for 2021-22. So for your diaries, put that in, and all the usual process from an annual general meeting, election of chair, vice chair, etc. will happen. And on that basis, unless any members wish to say anything, and thank you, James, for your comments in the box.
Chairman, I think
Sorry,
Bob Perkins has got his hand up.
Okay, Bob Perkins, wherever you are, can't see you, so.
Well, I'm still here, Dave.
Good.
Just a quick one. I won't be standing again as an independent. I think I'm like you, one of the original people.
You are.
And having done 8 or 9 years before on the police authority, I think it's time to move on and let someone else take over. But I wish you all well, and I'm sure you'll go on to greater things.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you for your support and being a colleague through this period. Appreciate that very much. Any other members?
Chairman, ditto from me. Ditto from me, Chairman. Thank you all for your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I can remember you being appointed to the panel. I can also remember you managing the whole of Hampshire Constabulary's budget. And both give me great trepidation sometimes, but they no, he's done a fantastic job. I think we're extremely lucky to have had your skills available to us. So please, thank you for all you've done. Okay, on that basis, members, I shall ask the webcast to be ended and see you all in some form. Hopefully not virtually next time.